Arrival in Dust Creek. The train shuddered to a halt, spitting steam and dust that coated Anna's already travel-worn dress. Dust Creek. The name itself felt like a premonition. Clutching her worn carpet bag, she descended the steps, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The platform was a desolate stretch of sun-baked wood, surrounded by a landscape that seemed to stretch on forever, a canvas of ochre and brown, punctuated by the occasional gnarled tree struggling for survival. It was nothing like the rolling green hills of her home. A wave of dizziness washed over her. The air was thick with the scent of sage and something acrid, like burnt metal. She scanned the handful of faces waiting near the depot, searching for a familiar one. The photograph Elias had sent was creased and faded, but she remembered the broad, smiling face, the kind eyes. Then she saw him. He wasn't smiling. He stood apart from the others, a tall, imposing figure draped in shadow despite the glaring sun. He wore a dark, ill-fitting suit that seemed to amplify his size. As he moved towards her, the smile from the photograph seemed a cruel mockery. His eyes, the ones she'd thought were kind, were cold and assessing, like a butcher eyeing a side of beef. Anna, May Harding. His voice was a low growl, sandpaper on stone. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. Yes, sir. I'm Annamai. He didn't offer a handshake or a polite greeting. He simply stared, his gaze lingering on her face, her figure. It felt invasive, predatory. You're smaller than I expected. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. This wasn't the man from the photograph. Or, if it was, something had twisted him into something else. My bag, she stammered, gesturing weakly towards the carpet bag at her feet. He ignored it, his eyes never leaving hers. Come on, we have a long ride. He reached for her arm, his fingers like iron manacles closing around her wrist. Panic flared. She tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. Wait, please. I need to. His smile returned, but it was a chilling, joyless thing. You need to do as you're told, Anna May. That's what you're here for, isn't it? She opened her mouth to protest, to scream, but the words caught in her throat. The other people on the platform seemed to fade into the background, their faces blurred and indistinct. She was alone, trapped in the gaze of a man who radiated menace. Then, a voice cut through the silence, sharp and clear as a gunshot. Let her go. Every head on the platform turned. Standing near the edge of the depot, leaning against a post as if he'd been there all along, was a man she hadn't noticed before. He was tall and lean, with a face etched with hard lines and shadowed by the brim of a worn hat. His eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on the man holding Anna. Elias's double stiffened, his grip on Anna's wrist tightening. This ain't your business, stranger. The newcomer didn't reply. He simply pushed himself off the post and moved forward, his movements fluid and purposeful. The sunlight glinted off the silver star pinned to his vest. I said, let her go. His voice was quiet, but there was an undeniable steel in it. The man holding Anna sneered. You gonna make me, lawman? He released Anna's wrist, but his eyes remained locked on the approaching figure. I paid good money for this woman. She's mine. She's not property, the lawman said, his hand hovering near the gun at his hip. The man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You think that little badge scares me? I got papers, says she's going to be my wife. Those papers are worthless if she doesn't want to go with you. The lawman's eyes flickered to Anna, a silent question in their depths. She stared at the lawman, her mind reeling. Hope flickered within her, a fragile spark in the darkness. But fear still held her captive. Before she could speak, the other man lunged. It happened so fast. A glint of metal, a muffled roar, and the man crumpled to the ground, a dark stain blooming on his chest. Anna gasped, stumbling backward. The world seemed to tilt, the sounds of the platform fading into a dull hum. She stared at the fallen man, then at the lawman, who stood motionless, his gun still smoking in his hand. He wasn't who he said he was, the lawman said, his voice devoid of emotion. The real Elias is dead. This one was an imposter. He holstered his gun and walked towards her, his gaze piercing. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. He picked up her carpet bag. Come on, this place isn't safe. He didn't wait for her reply. He turned and started walking towards a waiting horse, leading it with one hand and holding her bag in the other. Anna hesitated for a moment, then followed, her legs moving as if in a dream. She glanced back at the body lying on the platform, a chilling reminder of the danger she had narrowly escaped. As she mounted the horse behind him, she realized she knew nothing about this man, this stranger who had saved her life. But in that moment, he was her only hope. Dust Creek had promised a new beginning, but had delivered something far more terrifying. Now, she was riding away with a man shrouded in mystery, heading towards an unknown future, unsure whether to trust him or to fear him even more than the man he had killed. Kidnapped. The echo of gunshots still reverberated in Anna's skull as Cole, the grim-faced lawman, snatched her warm valise. A sharp intake of breath escaped her as she instinctively clutched her reticule, watching him heave the bag onto the back of his solid-looking horse. Mount up, he ordered, his voice a gravelly command that invited no debate. Where? What's happening? She asked, her voice a shaky thread, fear a cold hand squeezing her throat. Elias, the bloody charlatan, lay disregarded in the swirling dust. Cole Tanner might be a savior, but his methods reeked of coercion. He offered no explanation, simply reached, his grip surprisingly forceful, and hoisted her onto the saddle. Though time-worn, it proved surprisingly accommodating, the leather sighing softly as she settled. He swung up behind, his presence a palpable weight, invading her personal space, and she recoiled. The aroma of cured hide, honest sweat, an untamed wilderness emanated from him, assaulting her senses and fueling her growing disquiet. Before she could voice objection, Cole spurred the horse forward. Dust Creek dissolved into a hazy backdrop of tumble-down buildings and staring faces as they bolted, the rhythmic cadence of hooves drumming against the arid earth. The subsequent days bled into a continuum of relentless journeying. From sunrise to sunset, they rode, the terrain morphing from featureless, scrub-infested plains to the jagged foothills of an immense mountain range. Cole possessed a taciturn nature. His lengthy silences yawned with unasked inquiries and burgeoning anxieties. He brought down rabbits and squirrels with unnerving precision, kindled compact, economical fires at night, and maintained a vigilant watch over the untamed surroundings. Anna, raised in the refined environment of Philadelphia, felt utterly adrift. Her city attire felt ludicrous, an itchy, impractical burden. Her hands, more familiar with embroidery needles and ivory keys, were now chafed and blistered from clinging to the saddle. Every fiber of her being throbbed. "Where are you taking me?" she finally ventured on the third day, her voice raspy from the arid mountain air. They had paused beside a gurgling brook to refresh the horse. The soul sounds the murmur of water and the distant shriek of a hawk. Cole remained fixed, his gaze locked on the horizon, jaw clenched. "Away from here," he responded curtly. "Away from those who think they have a claim on you." "But no one owns me." The words, unbidden, tumbled from her lips. The implication lingered, heavy and uncomfortable. Was she now the chattel of this tight-lipped lawman? He finally turned to her, his eyes, the hue of a gathering squall, piercing her apprehension. "No," he affirmed, a fleeting expression playing across his features. "You don't." Yet his actions resounded louder than any assurance. He made no attempt to return her to Dust Creek, no proposition to place her on a stagecoach bound eastward. He pressed onward, deeper into the implacable wilderness. One evening, huddled around a paltry fire, she observed him hone his knife, the flickering flames illuminating the contours of his face, accentuating the weariness etched around his eyes. "Why did you save me?" she inquired, the question she had suppressed finally surfacing. He halted, the knife suspended in midair. For a protracted moment, he merely stared into the fiery heart, as if seeking answers in its incandescent depths. "Because," he finally breathed, his voice a mere susurrus, "I couldn't stand by and let it happen." His response was enigmatic, unsatisfying, and yet it offered a glimmer of solace. Perhaps he wasn't merely a captor, not entirely. Perhaps, beneath the gruff facade and unnerving intensity, resided a man governed by principle, a man with convictions. But the nature of those convictions, and their implications for her, remained as unfathomable and imposing as the mountains that enclosed them. As the sun sank below the peaks, painting the terrain in elongated shadows, Anna recognized one undeniable truth. Her existence had undergone an irrevocable shift, and she was utterly dependent on a man she scarcely knew. The cabin in the woods. The cabin, a rugged refuge hewn from the mountainside, offered scant welcome beyond the promise of shelter. A plume of smoke, a defiant flag against the wind's serrated edge, rose from its chimney. The horses, flanks slicked with sweat, found respite in a lean-to cobbled together behind structure. Anna followed Cole's efficient movements, his shadowed form, a familiar yet unsettling presence as twilight bled across the sky. Inside, the single room centered around a massive hearth. A roughly fashioned table and chairs occupied the heart of the space, with a narrow cot tucked into the far corner. Scents of resin and kindling lingered in the air, briefly soothing Anna's frayed nerves. Lantern light bloomed, painting the log walls with dancing specters. Methodically, Cole stoked the fire and draped their damp garments near the warmth. He offered her water in a dented tin cup, accepted with a mumbled thanks, her throat constricted by fear and grit. Then he leaned against the mantel, his gaze, dark pools reflecting the flames, pinned her in place. He called himself Jedediah Stone. He began, his voice a low rumble. Farmer wasn't in his repertoire. He was an outlaw. Anna's hand trembled, the cup rattling against her teeth. An outlaw? The letters. Fabricated, Cole stated blunt. He's been preying on women headed west. Marrying them, seizing their land, their savings, worse things. The color leached from Anna's face. Visions of hearth and home in this untamed land curdled into a chilling premonition. She recalled a predatory gleam in Stone's eyes, a smile that never quite reached them. Bile rose in her throat. She sank onto a chair, the tin cup clattering against the tabletop. Why intervene? She whispered, her voice a thread. Cole straightened, his focus intense. Because it was the only decent thing to do, and because I knew what he was. How could you? A flicker of something dark crossed his features. I've danced with devils like him before. He had prices on his head in 3 territories. Anna huddled into herself, shivering despite the crackling fire. The enormity of her folly crashed over her. Naive, desperate for a fresh start, she'd stumbled into a viper's nest. Now, she was stranded in a lonely cabin with a stranger, a man who had delivered her from danger, but remained a closed book. I don't understand, she said, her voice gaining strength, tinged with defiance. Why bring me here? Why not Dust Creek? Nowhere more dangerous. Cole's voice was devoid of inflection. Stone had partners. They'll be sniffing around for him. And for you. For me? I've done nothing. They won't see it that way. They'll assume you know where he stashed his ill-gotten gains, or worse. A pause, his gaze unwavering. Here, you're relatively safe. For the moment. Anna's gaze swept the small cabin, her supposed haven. It felt like a cage. She was trapped, relying on a man she couldn't decipher, a man whose shoulders seemed to bear the weight of untold burdens. Had he rescued her from one peril only to deliver her into another? I don't even know your name, she said, suspicion sharpening her tone. Cole, he answered, his expression inscrutable. Cole Tanner. She scrutinized his features, seeking a flicker of falsehood, a glimpse into his true motives. But his face was an unreadable mask, all sharp angles and weathered skin. He was an enigma, and she possessed no key to unlock him. All that was certain was her life had been irrevocably shattered, and she was utterly dependent on a man she distrusted, in a wilderness she didn't know, with no safe path forward. Life in the wild. The cabin proved more compact than Anna had envisioned. A single room ascended by a rudimentary ladder to a sleeping loft. The mingled aroma of wood smoke and evergreen needles permeated the space, an odd comfort in its unfamiliarity. Sunbeams, slicing through chinks in the log walls, illuminated dust motes and a reality drastically removed from her previous existence. Her initial attempt at baking was a flat-out failure. The dough, reliant on what Cole mysteriously called starter, stubbornly refused to rise, resulting in a dense lump no creature, not even the cabin squirrel tenant, would consider edible. Cole, amused, simply demonstrated the process again, his strong hands coaxing the recalcitrant mass with surprising delicacy. "Patience, Anna," he murmured, his voice a deep resonance. "Everything out here demands patience." Housekeeping presented its own set of trials. The cabin bore the unmistakable mark of Cole's solitary life. Gossamer cobwebs veiled the rafters, and a fine layer of grit clung to every surface. Driven by an urgent need to impose order, Anna attacked the grime, her city-bred hands protesting with each swipe and scrub. Cole observed her efforts, leaning in the doorway, his expression a puzzle. "You don't have to do that," he eventually offered, a trace of self-consciousness in his tone. "I want to," she retorted, wiping perspiration. "It makes me feel capable." He pushed off the frame and approached the hearth, prodding at the embers with a poker. "There are other ways you could be useful." A rhythm began to emerge in the ensuing days. Under Cole's terse but insightful tutelage during their woodland walks, Anna started discerning edible flora. She savored the tart, earthy bite of wild berries and the honeyed kiss of mountain nectar. She wrestled with the axe, initially an unwieldy weight in her hands, until it gradually transformed into an extension of her will. Tending the fire became an exercise in control, conjuring flames from reluctant kindling, an oddly gratifying accomplishment. Cole, ever taciturn, communicated through action. He revealed the art of tracking creatures, deciphering predator signs, and navigating the undergrowth with near-silent grace. He taught her marksmanship. The rifle's kick bruised her shoulder, yet instilled an unprecedented sense of power. One sunset, as the jagged peaks ignited with fiery hues, Anna watched Cole hone his blade on the porch. The air, crisp and invigorating, carried the scent of pine and damp earth. A hawk spiraled overhead, its piercing cry echoing through the valley. "Why do you live here?" she blurted, the question escaping without warning. Cole paused, his gaze fixed intently on the sharpening steel. "I appreciate the silence," he responded finally. "And the freedom. Is that it?" He lifted his head, their eyes meeting. "No," he conceded. "It's not." He offered no further explanation, but Anna perceived a deep reservoir of unspoken sorrow concealed beneath his stoic facade, a narrative he held close. As the weeks drifted by, Anna detected subtle metamorphoses within herself. Her complexion deepened, her muscles gained definition, and her gaze, once haunted by trepidation, now reflected nascent resilience. The mountain solitude held a strange allure, a tranquility unknown amidst the city's frenetic pulse. The apprehension she initially felt regarding Cole mellowed into cautious admiration, and something more complex, something she couldn't yet define. One dawn, she awoke to find Cole absent. A note rested on the table, etched in his rugged hand, "Gone to town. Back before dark. Keep the home fires burning." A wave of disquiet washed over her. She was alone, truly alone, for the first time since Stone. She possessed firearm proficiency, fire-starting acumen, and foraging skills. But the wilderness felt immense and unforgiving, and this knowledge offered scant solace. She filled the day with chores, straining her ears for any indication of Cole's return, her gaze sweeping the perimeter. As twilight approached, the first tendrils of panic snaked through her. What if he didn't return? What if Stone's henchmen found her? Just as the sun vanished behind the ridgeline, the rumble of approaching hooves reached her ears. Relief surged through her, nearly buckling her knees. Cole materialized from the trees, guiding a pack horse heavy with provisions. He dismounted, Fatigue etched on his face, and approached her. "Everything all right?" he asked, his voice low and guarded. "Yes," she affirmed, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly. "Everything's all right." But gazing into his eyes, she understood that everything was anything but. The menace that had thrown them together still lingered, a lurking presence in the shadows, poised to strike. Their sanctuary, she now apprehended, was as fragile as breath on glass. The gang's revenge. The axe's blunt report echoed, a lonely percussion in the mountain stillness. Sweat slicked Anna's brow as she brought the blade down once more, the wood cleaving apart with a sharp, satisfying crack. Her strength was growing, her skill honed with each swing. From the porch, Cole stood as a silent guardian, his gaze sweeping the perimeter of trees. The quiet shattered. A horse's high-pitched cry, too near for comfort, sliced through the air. Then another in rapid succession. Anna went still, the axe arrested mid-swing, her pulse a frantic drum against her ribs. Cole moved, a predator uncoiling, the rifle materializing in his grip. Inside, he barked, voice a low rasp. No argument from Anna. She dropped the axe, scrambling for the cabin, Cole a step behind. The door slammed, the heavy bar dropped into place. He was at the window in an instant, eyes narrowed, searching through a crack in the logs. "How many?" she breathed, her voice thin. "7, maybe 8, he murmured, jaw clenched. "Cal's in the lead." Cal. The name hung like a shroud, pregnant with unspoken history. The sole mentioned sibling of the man Cole had fell back in Dust Creek. A cold plate, revenge, slowly stirred it seemed. "They're fanning out," Cole observed, never taking his eyes off them. Encirclement. A wave of icy dread washed through Anna. This was the reckoning. The peril she fled, the threat Cole sought to shield her from, had finally arrived at their doorstep. Boots crunched on the frozen ground. A voice, raw and coarse, knifed through the tense air. "Tanner, show yourself. We know you're in there." Cole remained a statue, rifle tracking movement in the thicket. "You murdered my brother, Tanner," the voice bellowed, laced with fury. "Think you can hole up in these mountains and escape justice? We're here to settle the score. And that woman you're with, she's coming with us." A chill seized Anna's heart. They knew about her. This wasn't just about Cole's past. It was about the stolen money, the botched deal back in Dust Creek. Cole turned then, his gaze locking with hers. A granite resolve hardened his features, yet beneath that, a glimpse of regret. "I warned you it wasn't finished," he murmured, his tone gentled. "I'm sorry I dragged this into your life." "It's not your doing," Anna countered, summoning a bravery she didn't possess. "I made my own choices." "Back away from the windows," Cole commanded. He moved swiftly, seizing the second rifle from its place above the hearth and thrusting it toward her. "Can you handle this?" Anna hesitated, fear weighing heavy in her grasp. She'd never fired a gun, but she nodded, accepting the weapon, her hands trembling. Cole demonstrated the loading procedure, the aiming stance. The rifle's weight felt oddly grounding, a stark reminder of the need to protect herself. "Just point and shoot," Cole instructed, his voice a steady anchor. "I'll direct you." The shouts from outside intensified, escalating to a fever pitch of menace. Cal's patience was wearing thin. "Last chance, Tanner," he roared. "Come out peacefully, or we're coming in by force." Cole ignored the threat. He resumed his post at the window, rifle held firm. Anna stood close behind, the weapon clutched tightly, her pulse hammering in her ears. The silence stretched, oppressive and stifling, broken only by the fire's gentle crackle. Then a gunshot exploded. The sound tore through the stillness, followed by a violent report as a bullet impacted the cabin wall, sending splinters flying near the window. "Here they come," Cole breathed, barely audible over the pounding in Anna's ears. "Brace yourself. A fight for survival." The first shot splintered the cabin doorframe, sending wood shards stinging Anna's cheek. Cole roared, shoving her behind the overturned table they used for meals. "Stay down, and keep your head covered." Another bullet whizzed past, embedding itself in the wall above them. The smell of gunpowder filled the small space, acrid and sharp. Anna's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the chaos. This wasn't the quiet life she'd imagined, not even close. Cole, low to the ground, returned fire, the retort of his rifle deafening in the confined space. He moved with a practiced ease that spoke of countless similar encounters. He was a predator in his element, all sharp angles and deadly precision. "Can you shoot?" Cole yelled, not taking his eyes off the window. Anna hesitated. She'd never held a gun in her life, let alone fired one. Her experience with firearms was limited to the illustrated pages of dime novels. "No," she whispered, fear constricting her throat. "Damn it," Cole muttered. He grabbed a rifle from the rack and shoved it toward her. "Learn quick. Cal won't wait for you to decide if you're ready." He showed her how to chamber a round, the rifle heavy and cold in her trembling hands. The weight of it, the potential for destruction, was terrifying, but the terror of what awaited them outside was greater. Cal's voice, amplified by the open air, cut through the din tanner. "You gonna hide behind a woman, you coward?" Cole ignored him, firing another shot. "Take aim through the window crack," he instructed Anna, his voice calm amidst the storm. "Squeeze, don't yank the trigger." Anna peered through the narrow opening. A figure moved in the trees. Cal, she presumed, judging by the venom in his voice and the confidence of his movements. She sighted down the barrel, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the rifle steady. Closing her eyes for a moment, she focused on Cole's instructions, trying to block out the fear, the noise, the sheer impossibility of what she was being asked to do. She imagined the rifle was a sewing needle, the target a stubborn piece of fabric. Taking a breath, she squeezed. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the sound deafening. She flinched, expecting to have missed completely. "Reload," Cole barked, already firing again. "Do it now." She fumbled with the lever, the metal slick with sweat. As she chambered another round, she chanced a glance outside. Cal was gone from where she'd seen him last. "Did I?" she started, but Cole cut her off. "Don't think, just shoot. They'll be back." And he was right. A volley of shots ripped through the air, several impacting the cabin. Anna fired again, this time with slightly more confidence. She didn't know if she hit anything, but she saw one of the men duck behind a tree. They fought like that for what felt like an eternity, a chaotic dance of gunfire and desperation. Cole moved with a calculated efficiency, his shots precise and deadly. Anna, fueled by adrenaline and a primal instinct for survival, found a surprising aptitude for marksmanship. She wasn't just a mail-order bride anymore. She was fighting for her life. Suddenly, Cole grunted, staggering back against the wall. A crimson stain blossomed on his shoulder. "Cole!" Anna cried, dropping the rifle. "I'm fine," he gritted out, but his face was pale. "Keep shooting." He pressed a hand to the wound, trying to staunch the flow of blood. Anna grabbed the rifle again, her fear now laced with a fierce protectiveness. She wouldn't let them take him. Not after everything. Seeing Cole wounded seemed to embolden Cal and his men. They surged forward, firing as they ran. Anna, ignoring her own terror, unleashed a rapid barrage of shots, forcing them to retreat back into the trees. Finally, after what felt like an endless battle, the firing ceased. An eerie silence descended, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the hearth and Cole's ragged breathing. Anna cautiously peered out the window. The trees were still, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and death. They had driven them off. "For now." "Cole," she said, her voice trembling, "we did it." Cole slumped against the wall, his face etched with pain. "Not yet. We didn't," he rasped. "They'll be back. Healing and trust." The fire popped and hissed, etching flickering silhouettes onto the rough canvas walls of their camp. Cole leaned heavily against his saddle, his pallor stark against the ingrained dirt on his face. The bullet's passage had ravaged his shoulder, and despite Anna's ministrations with the cleanest cloth she could find, an angry, scarlet flush throbbed around the entry wound. "It's getting worse," she breathed, her voice a thread, as she traced the feverish skin with a hesitant finger. Cole's jaw tightened, a film of perspiration glistening on his forehead. Infected, likely. A wave of nausea washed over Anna. That word. She'd only ever overheard it whispered in the halls of her finishing school, witnessed the shadowed anxieties in the nurses' faces when a mere scratch bloomed into something lethal. I recall something, she stammered, her mind scrambling for purchase, desperate for any useful memory. Mrs. Hawthorne, the headmistress, she used a concoction on ailing rose bushes. To draw out the rot, she said. Cole observed her, his gaze unwavering. And you think that might work on a lead slug's handiwork? I haven't a clue, she confessed, her voice trembling with urgency. But we're running out of options. Driven by renewed resolve, Anna sorted through her scant provisions, unearthing a small, forgotten pouch of dried herbs. Chamomile, thankfully, and something that hinted at sage. Using a flat rock, she ground them into a coarse powder, then combined it with water from the nearby stream, simmering the mixture over the flames until it reduced to a thick, sharp-smelling paste. Cole sucked in a sharp breath as she daubed the poultice onto his injury, the heat radiating against his inflamed flesh like living embers. He bit down hard on a strip of leather, his knuckles bone-white as he clenched his hand into a fist. "Hold still," Anna directed, her tone surprisingly commanding. With swift, practiced movements, she plastered the wound with the herbal salve and secured it with a fresh piece of linen. The following days blurred into a relentless cycle of care. Anna changed the dressing with unwavering regularity, vigilantly monitoring his spiking temperature, urging him to swallow small sips of water, and patiently feeding him spoonfuls of thin broth. He proved a trying patient, taciturn and unyielding. Yet beneath that gruff exterior, Anna detected a fragility she hadn't suspected. During those long, hushed hours, as Cole teetered between wakefulness and delirium, Anna discovered herself confiding in him, sharing stories of her life back east. The constricting predictability of the boarding school, her secret longings to open a bakery filled with sweet scents, the gnawing solitude that had pushed her to answer that fateful advertisement. And gradually, in hesitant whispers, Cole began to reciprocate. He spoke of his father, a cattleman who had bred within him an abiding reverence for the land, and his younger sister, stolen by sickness in her childhood. He recounted the murkiness he had encountered as a marshal, the brutality and covetousness that festered within men's souls. "I try to uphold what's right," he admitted one night, his voice hoarse and enfeebled. "But lately, I question if it means anything at all." Anna reached out and clasped his hand, her fingers tangling with his. His skin felt parched and burning, yet his grip possessed an unexpected strength. "It does," she insisted, her voice ringing with conviction. "It matters to me, Cole." As the days unfolded, Cole's fever began to abate, and the angry redness surrounding his wound began to recede. The poultice, coupled with Anna's steadfast devotion, appeared to be taking hold. One dawn, he rose unassisted, his eyes sharp and focused. He regarded Anna, his expression softening with gratitude. "You pull me back from the edge," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "We helped each other," Anna countered, her chest brimming with a warmth unlike any she had previously experienced. A comfortable quiet descended upon them, punctuated only by the snap of the campfire and the mournful cry of a distant coyote. Anna came to the realization that amid peril and uncertainty, a delicate bond had taken root between them, tempered in the crucible of anxiety and dependence. It was a bond constructed on mutual trust, respect, and a nascent affection that neither could readily ignore. However, as Cole's stamina returned, the harsh realities of their predicament resurfaced, looming large in the foreground. Cal remained at large, and they were still fugitives. Their sanctuary was only fleeting, a brief reprieve in a world that seemed determined to shatter them. The bounty hunter. The scrape of a boot against gravel shattered the afternoon stillness. Anna, mending a tear in Cole's shirt near the cabin's porch, stiffened. Cole, who had been whittling a piece of wood, his movements now still, went very still. He tossed the wood and knife aside and rose, his gaze fixed on the approaching figure. A man, lean and wiry with a face weathered like old leather, emerged from the trees. He wore a low-slung gun belt and a hat pulled low over his eyes, casting his face in shadow. Jedediah Jed Stone, bounty hunter. Anna knew the type. Dust Creek was full of them. Afternoon, Stone drawled, his voice raspy as if coated in grit. He stopped a few yards away, his eyes scanning the cabin, then lingering on Anna. Heard tell Tanner finally met his end. Shane that, though a man collecting bounties can't be too sentimental. Cole didn't respond, his expression unreadable. Anna could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. Stone chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Rumor has it, he was holed up with a woman. Seems the rumors were true. His gaze sharpened, pinning Anna. You wouldn't happen to be Miss Anna Mae Harding, would you? Anna straightened, her hands clenching at her sides. What if I am? Just need to ask you a few questions, Stone said, his voice taking on a deceptively gentle tone. About your association with Cole Tanner, and about the circumstances surrounding the death of a certain Mr. Silas Blackwood back in Dust Creek. I have nothing to say, Anna retorted, refusing to be intimidated. Stone's eyes narrowed. That's not how the law works, Miss Harding. You were last seen in the company of a known outlaw. You'll come back to Dust Creek with me. For questioning. Cole finally spoke, his voice a low growl. She's not going anywhere. Stone's gaze snapped back to Cole, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Didn't think you'd be quite so attached to the merchandise, Tanner. Though I'll admit, she's a sight prettier than the usual vermin you run with. But the law's the law, and the law wants to know what she knows. He spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dusty ground. Now, are you going to make this easy, or are we going to do this the hard way? Cole took a step forward, his hand hovering near the butt of his revolver. She's done nothing wrong. Leave her alone. Wrong, Stone scoffed. Being an accessory to an outlaw's crimes is wrong. Harboring a fugitive is wrong. I'm sure a few other things will surface once we get her back to town. Anna felt a surge of anger and a cold dread. Back to Dust Creek meant back to the lies, the scrutiny, the danger she had desperately tried to escape. I told you, I'm not going anywhere with you, she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to remain composed. Stone ignored her, his focus solely on Cole. Don't make me do this, Tanner. You're already a dead man walking. Don't make me add another body to the count. He took a step closer, his hand now resting on his own weapon. The air crackled with tension. Anna could hear the wind whispering through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and impending violence. She knew Cole wouldn't let Stone take her, but she also knew that confronting him would only lead to more bloodshed. Cole's eyes, dark and intense, locked with Stone's. You want her, you'll have to go through me. Stone grinned, a predatory expression that sent a shiver down Anna's spine. That, he said, his voice barely a whisper, is exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Confrontation and confession. A palpable tension gripped the air, thick enough to taste. Jed's gaze flicked between Cole and Anna, his initial cockiness eroded by a flicker of anxiety. Tanner, he drawled, the name laced with venom. Word was you'd bought the farm. Cole's jaw ticked. Rumors often prove premature. He shifted, a silent barrier between Jed and Anna. You're trespassing, Stone, and disturbing my guests. Jed spat, a brown stain marring the parched earth. Just aiming to ask the lady some questions regarding her involvement with the late Virgil and the unfortunate business back in Dust Creek. Anna had no part in any of it. Cole's tone was a low growl. Virgil was a viper, and he met a fitting end. As for Dust Creek, the real story is buried where you won't find it. Anna stepped up, squaring her shoulders. As I told you, Mr. Stone, I only sought my fiancée. I was as much a pawn in Virgil's game as anyone. Jed's eyes narrowed, dissecting her features. Could be, or not. All I am is a bounty man chasing a pay. Folks crave answers. He paused, adding almost casually, and tales circulate about you, Tanner. About the man you once were. Cole's expression darkened. A gust of wind stirred, whipping dust devils around them like restless spirits. I wore a ranger star, stone, took an oath to the law. I honored it. His voice resonated with granite. And I'm warning you now, right on, before you regret ever setting eyes on this place. The unspoken threat hung heavy between them. Jed's hand twitched towards his revolver, but stayed put. He knew the odds. Cole Tanner, even in retirement, was a force not to be trifled with. He swallowed hard, just saying, secrets have a habit of surfacing. And when they do, your little haven won't feel so cozy anymore. He flicked a glance at Anna, something indecipherable in his gaze. You might mull that over, Miss Harding. With a final look of grudging acceptance, Jed wheeled his horse around. He jabbed his heels into the animal's flanks, vanishing into the trees in a flurry of dust and thundering hooves. The silence that followed throbbed with unspoken words. Anna exhaled unsteadily, her limbs trembling. Cole turned to her, his face softening with concern. He won't be back. Not soon. He reached for her hand, his touch sending a jolt through her. Anna, he murmured, his voice gravelly with emotion. I know this isn't the life you envisioned, and I know I'm not the kind of man you deserve. She met his gaze, her eyes reflecting a blend of fear and something deeper, a mirror of the emotions warring within him. Cole, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. It hasn't been easy, but I'm not sorry I found you. You saved me. Repeatedly. He framed her face with his hands, his thumbs gently caressing her skin. And you saved me, Anna. Before you, I was adrift, simply existing. You brought the dawn back into my world. He lowered his head, his breath ghosting across her lips. I know I shouldn't. I know I offer you nothing but danger and uncertainty. I don't care, she breathed, her eyes locked on his. None of that matters. I care about you, Cole. Their lips met, a tentative exploration at first, then a fierce, desperate claiming. It was a kiss born of shared trials, of unspoken desires, of a bond forged in the fires of adversity. It was a kiss that sealed their destinies, intertwining them in a way neither could have predicted. When they parted, breathless and shaken, Cole gazed at her, his eyes shimmering with a love he thought forever extinguished. I love you, Anna, he confessed, the words rough and heartfelt. I never believed I could feel this way again. Tears glistened in Anna's eyes. I love you too, Cole, she whispered, her voice thick with feeling. More than I ever imagined possible. A new life together. The ride back to the cabin was steeped in the redolence of evergreens and moist earth. The choice now made wordlessly binding them like the rising dust behind their horses. Jedstone's appearance, the stark exposure of their feelings, had winnowed away all doubts. Flight was no longer an option. A life lived glancing over one's shoulder held no appeal. They'd make their stand. They'd contend, if necessary, and stay put. Cole, Anna ventured, her voice a mere sigh against the susurrus of the woods. He met her gaze, a silent question in his eyes. Are you certain about this? About us? He checked his mount, halting at the edge of the clearing. The cabin, time-worn yet defiant, stood watch against the mountain's immensity. It was humble, but their own. More sure than I've ever been about anything, Anna. He reached out, his weathered palm caressing her cheek. This place, it feels like finding my way back. A smile blossomed on her face, eclipsing the remnants of fear. It echoes that feeling for me. The subsequent weeks rushed by in a flurry of exertion and quiet intimacy. The cabin, solid as it was, demanded care. Rain found its way through the roof, cracks spiderwebbed the windows, and the single room felt restrictive, uninviting. They labored in tandem, their movements evolving into a synchronized ballet of shared intent. Cole, drawing on his knowledge of carpentry and the terrain, guided her, instructing her in the arts of hammer swinging, fence mending, and plant identification. Anna, for her part, imbued the stark space with warmth and domestic charm. She fashioned new curtains from spare materials, suspended wildflowers from the rafters to dry, and coaxed a barren patch into a burgeoning kitchen garden. The quiet between them had lost its tension, replaced by a comfortable harmony, brimming with implicit understanding. They shared meals by the hearth, the modest fare elevated by the labor that preceded it. Their conversations skirted the past, focusing instead on the future, the life they were sculpting together. Anna confided her aspirations for a modest schoolhouse, where she would teach children the power of language. Cole envisioned tending a small drove of cattle, forging a life of tranquility and seclusion. One afternoon, pausing from repairs on the pasture fence to wipe perspiration from her forehead, Anna turned to him, her expression grave. "Cole," she began, "what about him?" "Virgil." Cole froze, his jawline hardening. "He's gone, Anna. He's in no position to cause any harm. But the reason he led me to Dust Creek still remains. The deception. Someone must have directed him." Cole leaned against the fence post, his gaze sweeping the breadth of the valley. Perhaps, or perhaps he was simply a desperate soul seeking an easy fortune. "I suspect something more elaborate at play." He sighed, raking a hand through his hair. "We'll unravel it, Anna, together. But for now, let's focus on us, on anchoring ourselves here." She nodded, accepting his words for the moment. The questions persisted, matched by their resolve to confront them as one. With each passing day, the cabin transitioned from a mere sanctuary into a true home. The fragrance of pine intertwined with the scent of baking bread, the sound of laughter reverberating through the close quarters. They were crafting a refuge, a space where they could outrun the ghosts of yesterday and cultivate a future brimming with hope. One evening, as the sun dipped below the peaks, bathing the horizon in fiery hues, Cole sat on the porch, shaping a piece of wood. Anna emerged from the doorway, carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. She offered him one, settling beside him. "What are you creating?" she inquired, observing the skillful dance of his hands. "Just a small bird," he murmured, "for the windowsill. I thought it might brighten up the place." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "It's perfect." They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars prick the darkening canvas of the sky. The air was cool and invigorating, carrying the mingled scents of wood smoke and pine needles. "Cole," Anna whispered, breaking the stillness. "I'm happy, more than I ever imagined possible." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting a reciprocal love. "Me too, Anna, more than words can say." He laid aside the wooden knife and drew her close. They embraced, their bodies melding, their hearts resonating in a shared rhythm. The world receded, leaving only the two of them, bound by destiny, affection, and an unexpected adventure. As they stood there, illuminated by the pearly light of the moon, they acknowledged that their path would be fraught with challenges. The past would forever linger, threatening to encroach. Yet they also knew that together, they could withstand any adversity. They were establishing a new existence, born of the wilderness, seasoned by trials, and animated by a love that outshone any celestial body.